Hi, I'm Stephen Vantassel. You're listening to Living the Wildlife, discussing all things related to vertebrate pest control as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant and Pest Geek podcast for Living the Wildlife podcast. Always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and or other control methods to manage pests. Wildlife Control Consultant, LLC, Pest Geek Podcast, Living the Wildlife Podcast, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their or his affiliates are not responsible for followers' use of the information provided here. Hi everyone, Stephen Vantassel here, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek Podcast family. Hey, glad to have you on board. I hope your week is going well. I would suspect that most of my listeners here are in the depths of balls to the walls wildlife control because of the spring and all the young that are coming out. So I wish you all well. I hope you're going to be safe. In fact, today's presentation, we're going to talk about some safety, just a sort of little reminder, right, so that we can be safe so you can get home to your families and enjoy them and also enjoy the summer weather. So let's take a little pause here for a moment. This is the Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek podcast family, and so this is a podcast dedicated to all things related to wildlife control or vertebrate pest management. So our podcast, we try to get geeky, we get into some pretty technical issues. It's for people who are looking to get that edge for their business and do deep dives into some rather technical material that the general public and even people in wildlife control don't always have access to. So we're glad to have you on board. Love to get some comments from you. If you have any, you can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you. Thoughts for new shows. Perhaps you'd like to be on the show. Would love to hear from you. I think there's a lot of information that is out there in wildlife control land that we need to get out to others. And of course, if you have criticisms, you can reach me on that email as well. That's wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. All right. Well, my spring has been busy, not for doing wildlife control, been doing a lot of traveling and then doing some other projects as part of my wildlife control business, wildlife control consulting business, I should add. So I've been, work has really been taxing me a little bit. It's good. It's all good. But I've been doing some technical work for a company, and looks like they want me to do more. So wanted to do something quick out here and to talk about some safety issues. Of course, if you're looking for informational resources, do check out my website, wildlifecontrolconsultant.com. Check out the store, and you can purchase some of those items there or do a consultation or whatever that case may be. Well, this week I thought I would talk about ladder safety. Now, a lot of you are going to be, again, in the midst of a very busy season, and this is the time when you can get cavalier, when you can be trying to cut corners. And also with safety, you're like, well, I just don't want to move the ladder. I'm tired. This is your seventh or eighth house you've been to, and you're tired of pulling that ladder off. And rather than getting off the ladder and you shift it around, or maybe you're leaning too far, or you're just extending the ladder. You're at a height, you're not keeping the one force. I would go over some of the fundamental principles of ladder safety that's brought to us by OSHA. Now, sometimes OSHA is an agency that people love to hate, but the reality is OSHA has a lot of great information about being safe and keeping people from getting injured, because they collect all of this data over time. And so they're able to determine what went wrong when they do these investigations. And so over time, you get this vast depth of information so that we can avoid quote-unquote accidents. So this is a publication from them, and so I thought I would go down. You can certainly search it for yourself. It's OSHA, OSHA, Quick Card, Portable Ladder Safety. So maybe if you just do a search on Portable Ladder Safety, OSHA, OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So there's that. All right, well, let's kind of go down this list pretty quickly. And it's talking about one of the leading causes of occupational fatalities, which is kind of sad, and of course injuries. So these are things that this is their information, their data. They're saying that people with portable ladders, these are ladders that include step ladders, portable, these are extension ladders and combination ladders, right? Probably the ones that bend and fold in different directions. And what they're saying is that these ladders that you pull off your truck to service a client's needs, these are a leading cause of occupational death and injuries, often severe. I had a colleague who, just in a simple little one-floor roof on a garage, and he put the ladder up against the garage, and it kicked out on him, and he shattered his elbow. And it almost, I think it bankrupted him because he wasn't able to pay all the bills because he lost his ability to work. He was out of commission for at least a month for the cast and even longer. So this is serious business. And that was a very simple thing. It's one that kind of was like a freak accident sometimes, but this is what we need to be careful of, because all it takes is one little mistake, and 10 feet, 9 feet can kill you, right? Thankfully, he didn't die, but it was a very serious injury for him. So one of the first things that they tell you here with the OSHA guide, and that is read and follow all the markings on your ladder. So do you still have them? Can you still find them? Do you still know what they are, right? So usually they'll have little signs on it that'll say, you don't stand above this step or this rung. Make sure, the ropes aren't frayed and things like that. So definitely, if you're not sure that, maybe your ladder's too old and maybe you need another one, right? Ladders do have a death date, right? A date that you should hang them up and toss them to the great ladder junkyard in the sky, right? So this is something you're going to have to evaluate. Avoid electrical hazards. That's kind of a given, right? And don't assume that your fiberglass ladder is going to be the end all and be all there, right? So, but if you have an aluminum one you're using, that is a full-on lightning rod. So definitely look for overhead lines before you're carrying around your ladder, especially if you're carrying it in a vertical position. This is something that probably a lot of you don't do, and that is you need to inspect your ladder prior to using it. Now clearly in if you're doing 7 jobs in a day, are you going to check your ladder 7 times? Probably not, but that even if you check it once a day, that's probably going to be a good idea for you, right? Just to look it over to make sure that, are there any screws missing, or things look like they're warping? Is the ladder looking warped? Do some of those welds look like they're beginning to crack? How about the rope that you use for your extension ladders? It starting to fray a little bit. Do you need to maybe get that replaced? How are the feet? Are the rubbers on the feet, are they getting worn out? Do you maybe need to replace those? Is it starting to look like, maybe you've had it 5-6 years and those are hard years? Maybe you want to think about that you need to replace it. Maybe the ladder is not rated for your weight, right? Sometimes as we get older, we gain a little bit more weight than we care to realize, and we may be, getting a 200-pound rated ladder, and now all of a sudden we're 210, 220, and of course, you have to include all the equipment you're carrying as well. That's also the rating. So don't just simply rely on the fact that ladders are overbuilt for their rating, which is true. You don't want to rely on that, right? So this is a built-in safety, and you need to be sure that you're in line with that. So definitely check it out, and if it needs to be replaced, make sure you replace it. Probably this is one that we all cheat on a little bit, and that is you're supposed to maintain 3-point contact with a ladder, right? So that means whether it's 2 hands and 1 foot or 2 foot and 1 hand, we got to make sure when we're climbing, what do we do though? We're carrying an object with 1 hand and we're kind of 2-stepping and then 1-handing it, but we have a time when we're on the ladder and we don't have 3-point contact at all times. You got to make sure you have a system, right? That you either use a tool belt or you have a rope system where you pull things up to the roof. Got to be careful of cutting those types of corners. Make sure that you use the ladders appropriate to the job you're using them for. So this is where the ladder manufacturer, what you're purchasing, will tell you what the ladder is rated for and what it's used for. Do not use a ladder in a method that it wasn't designed for. And so, would that maybe cost you more money in having to buy additional equipment? Probably. But nevertheless, that is a requirement that you need to be thinking about, making sure you have the right tool designed for that particular job when we're dealing with ladders. One thing, you want to make sure that your ladders are free of any slippery material on the rungs, steps, or feet. I mean, that should be just a given. I remember having to climb ladders and I would have to break the ice off each rung as I climbed because I had to get to that squirrel on the roofline. That was not fun. Okay, so obviously we need to be sure that the ridges on our ladder rungs are not worn out, that we have the good grips on the feet, and that the ladder is in good condition. Do not use a self-supporting ladder like a step ladder as a single ladder. In other words, sometimes we cheat a little bit and we keep it closed and then just lean it up against a building. You are not supposed to do that. That is not how those ladders are designed. You should be using a traditional extension ladder for that. So don't cheat that way. Make sure you're using the ladder in the manner that it was designed. Never stand on the top rung of a ladder unless it was designed for that. Now, very few ladders would ever be designed for that, right? So make sure you don't do that. Let's continue on. So make sure your ladder's on a stable surface. You may be familiar with things called ladder levelers. We're not always working around houses with level ground. So I used to take a hammer, like a sod busting type hammer for trapping, and I would then scrape away at the soil so that I would make sure that the ladder was level. But there's also objects now that you can attach to the bottom of your ladders that are called ladder levelers, and so that they make up the distance to be sure that your ladder is level. And you can even purchase, I think, some levels so to make sure your ladder is really level. You attach them onto your ladder as well to make sure that they're level. Make sure the ladder doesn't shift when you're climbing. If it starts to shift, you may make sure you readjust things. Make sure when you're using an extension ladder, the extension ladder must extend at least 3 rungs above the level you're trying to reach. So that's essentially 3 feet. Typically the rungs are about a foot apart. So you need to make sure that when you're extending the ladder, that extends 3 rungs above the spot that you are trying to launch off to. And so again, make sure you have a ladder that's tall enough for the job that you're dealing with. Make sure you have the proper angle for your ladder, and the proper angle is a 1 to 4. That is, for every foot of rise, every 4 feet of rise, there should be 1 foot away from the structure. So and one way you can do that relatively quickly to make sure you're at the proper angle is put your feet at the bottom of the ladder and then just drop your arms forward. And you should touch one of the rungs of the ladder. If it's too close, if your arms are bent, then it's too far away. If you can't reach, then your ladder is too, the angle is too low. So make sure it should form a square when you touch that ladder, so you form that triangle, right? So the ladder's at an angle forming the hypotenuse and you're doing the 2 sides there. A ladder should be placed where it's secured to make sure that there's no traffic around the ladder. So those of you that work in high traffic areas, you need to get the cones or some hazard tape to make sure people aren't walking under your ladder, around your ladder. You need to make sure that people with vehicles aren't going to be near it. Now, typically that's not a problem for wildlife control operators, but those of you that work in dense cities, for example, that may be very much, you may be having to put your ladder in an alley access where people may drive. So you need to be sure that there is enough signage there, enough warning, so someone doesn't barrel through and then hit you with their vehicle and launch you off the top of that ladder. So make sure you have that type of material as well. Check the locks on your extension ladder to make sure they're fully engaged, because we know we slide them up, of course, relatively quickly, but make sure they're locked in before you begin to extend. Now, some of us would not only lock it in, but we would then tie off. So it's like a little extra, because the last thing you want to be is climbing that ladder and the things start to close, that extension ladder begin to slide close again. And then last but not least, this is probably one that a lot of you have probably violated, and that is do not exceed the maximum load rating of your ladder. So if your ladder rating is 250 pounds and you're 240, that means you can only carry 10 pounds worth of equipment up that ladder. Probably not going to be very successful, right? So you really need to go to a 275 or 300 rating ladder, right? So, but the problem is we like the smaller rating ladders because they're lighter and they're easier to handle. Don't chintz on your ladders, and so work that through. Be careful out there. Remember, if you have time to do it again, you had time to do it right the first time. And with ladder work, you need to make sure that you are safe, because you're not going to get sometimes a second chance, and sometimes these injuries can put you out of business, even if the injury is not life-threatening or lifetime debilitating. So be careful out there, everyone. Well, you've been listening to Stephen Vantassel, Living the Wildlife, as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. Thanks for listening. Do take a few moments, if you would, to ring the bell and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to hear from you, of course. You can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com, wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Would love to hear from you if you have ideas for future shows. Perhaps you want to be interviewed, or, yes, even if you have a criticism of the show as well. And lastly, of course, we want you to always remember this is Living the Wildlife. Why do we call it Living the Wildlife? Well, because we want you to live the wildlife, not be the wildlife. Take care, everybody.